George Russell did not crash at Spa because he suddenly forgot how to race. His Mercedes lost power at the exact moment the entire field was charging toward him. He started third. He exited Eau Rouge exposed. Several cars swept past. Lewis Hamilton arrived with far more speed. Then Russell was sent into the gravel before the opening lap was over. But the radio revealed the part television missed. Russell said the power loss was dangerous. Toto Wolff later confirmed a genuine Mercedes engine problem, admitted Russell had less energy available to deploy, and said the responsibility went 100% on the team. That means the collision at Les Combes may have started long before Hamilton and Russell touched. It may have started inside the battery system, when one of the fastest cars in Formula One suddenly became almost defenseless on the Kemmel Straight. And this was not an isolated failure. Russell had already lost a likely victory in Canada after a catastrophic battery problem, suffered another costly setback in Monaco, and left Belgium 50 points behind his teammate. Subscribe to the channel. Russell's race was already in danger before the contact ever happened. That is the part the television images could not fully explain. From the outside, it looked like a normal opening lap battle. Russell was ahead. Hamilton was closing. The braking zone arrived. The cars touched. Russell spun into the gravel. Simple. Except the sequence was not simple at all. Because Russell was not defending with a healthy Mercedes. He was trying to survive with less power than the cars around him. And at Spa, that changes everything. The opening lap is already one of the most chaotic moments of the entire weekend. The tires are cold. The fuel load is heavy. The field is compressed. Every driver is trying to gain ground before the race settles. One hesitation can cost multiple positions. One small technical problem can become a major accident. Russell started third after being promoted on the grid. That should have placed him directly inside the fight near the front. Mercedes had every reason to expect a strong result. The car had been one of the fastest packages all season. Its acceleration had been a major strength. Its energy deployment had repeatedly given the team an advantage. And Russell was starting close enough to attack. Then the power disappeared. Not completely. That would almost have been easier to understand. The car kept moving. But it stopped moving with the force Russell expected. That is where the danger began. A complete engine failure creates an obvious emergency. The driver slows sharply. He moves away from the racing line. The following cars can see the problem. A partial power failure is far more deceptive. The car still appears competitive. It is still on the circuit. The driver may still be fighting for position. But the speed is no longer normal. The drivers behind do not receive a warning. They only see the gap closing much faster than expected. And on the run through Eau Rouge toward the Kemmel Straight, that closing speed can become enormous. Russell climbed through one of the fastest sections in Formula One without the normal power needed to protect himself. The cars behind continued accelerating. He did not. That transformed him from a front-running contender into a target. Hamilton was one of the drivers who suddenly found himself arriving with more momentum. And once that speed difference appeared, the entire shape of the battle changed. Russell had fewer options. He could not simply accelerate away. He could not control the gap. He could not decide when the attack would begin. The technical problem made that decision for him. This is why Russell called the situation dangerous. He was not only frustrated about losing places. He understood the safety risk. A driver expects every car around him to behave within a certain performance window. The driver behind expects the car ahead to accelerate at a predictable rate. The driver ahead expects enough power to defend. When one of those expectations disappears, everyone must react instantly. One car moves left. Another moves right. A third commits to the braking zone. Then the available space begins disappearing. That is exactly the kind of chain reaction that can turn a technical problem into a collision. The contact at Les Combes was only the final visible moment. The real sequence had started before that. It started when Russell left Eau Rouge without the power he expected. It continued when the pack closed. It became critical when Hamilton reached him. And it ended when the Mercedes was sent into the gravel. That distinction matters because the stewards judged the contact. They did not judge the full technical chain. Hamilton received a 5-second penalty for causing the collision. That decision addressed the final movement between the two cars. Russell's radio revealed what happened before it. Without the power loss, Hamilton may never have been close enough to attempt the move. Without the speed difference, the cars may never have arrived at Les Combes side by side. Without the technical failure, the crash may never have existed. That does not erase Hamilton's responsibility for the contact. But it changes the meaning of the incident. Hamilton was not attacking a Mercedes operating normally. Russell was not defending with the performance he expected. The car had already weakened the situation before either driver made the final decision. And then Toto Wolff confirmed it. Mercedes had suffered a real power problem. The team lacked straight-line performance. Russell had less electrical energy available to deploy. And Wolff placed the responsibility directly on Mercedes. That public admission was crucial. It proved Russell was not inventing an excuse after the race. The team had seen the evidence. The power unit had not performed correctly. And Mercedes understood that its own failure had contributed to the crash. But Wolff's honesty created another question. How could a team with one of the strongest power units on the grid allow this to happen at the exact point where electrical deployment mattered most? That question becomes even more serious when the modern Formula One power unit is understood. The car does not depend only on the combustion engine. Electrical energy now represents a massive part of the total performance. The battery stores energy. The system deploys it around the lap. The driver expects that additional power at specific moments. When it arrives, the car accelerates violently. When it does not, the performance can fall away almost instantly. That is not a gradual weakness. It is a cliff. One moment, the driver has a championship-level car. The next, he is vulnerable to everyone behind. Russell discovered that at Spa. And the circuit magnified the problem. The climb through Eau Rouge and Rydillen leads directly into one of the longest acceleration zones of the lap. The driver reaches the top expecting the car to continue building speed. The following cars are already preparing to use the slipstream. Everything depends on momentum. Lose energy there, and the entire field can swallow the car. Russell did not only lose one position. He became exposed to several cars almost at once. That is why the problem was so dangerous. The speed difference was not created in a slow corner where the field could reorganize calmly. It appeared in one of the fastest and most committed parts of the circuit. There was almost no time to understand what had happened. Almost no time to warn the cars behind. Almost no time to move safely away from the fight. And Russell still had to make racing decisions. Should he defend? Should he move aside? Would the power return? Was the failure temporary? Could he recover the energy before Les Combes? Those questions had to be answered in seconds. That is an impossible situation for a driver. Move aside too early, and the race is destroyed. Stay in the fight, and the risk increases. Russell had started third. He was already inside a championship battle. He could not simply surrender every position without knowing whether the car would recover. His instinct was to remain competitive. But the machine had removed the normal protection that made competition possible. That is where a technical issue becomes a human trap. The car fails. The driver must react. The reaction is then judged as though the car were normal. That is why Russell's radio mattered so much. It captured the moment before the polished explanation. Before the team could shape the message. Before the public could reduce the incident to driver error. Russell knew immediately that the car had not given him what he needed. He knew the speed difference was abnormal. He knew the situation had become unsafe. That raw reaction carried more truth than any simple crash replay. And Wolff's support showed Mercedes understood the seriousness. He said Russell had the team's full backing. He acknowledged that part of the final outcome could still involve the driving. But he made the larger point clear. Mercedes had failed Russell. That public protection was important because the championship consequences were severe. Russell left Belgium with 0 points. Antonelli continued scoring. The gap between them grew to 50 points. And Russell was already dealing with a season shaped by reliability and operational problems. Canada had cost him a likely victory through a catastrophic battery failure. Monaco had brought another costly setback through a failed pit stop. Now Belgium added a power unit issue that did not only damage performance. It ended the race. 3 different failures. 3 different circuits. The same driver paying the price. That pattern can become more dangerous than one broken component. Because the technical failures begin changing the championship itself. Russell can recover from one bad weekend. He can recover from one penalty. He can even recover from one retirement. But repeated losses create a gap that changes how he must race. 50 points creates urgency. Urgency creates pressure. Pressure changes decisions. Russell may feel he has to attack earlier. He may take more risk in qualifying. He may become less willing to accept a supporting strategy. He may believe every opportunity must be taken immediately because another technical failure could arrive at any moment. That is how reliability begins influencing the driver even when the car is working. A driver who trusts the machine can remain patient. A driver who expects another failure cannot. That is one of the hidden consequences Mercedes now has to manage. The team must fix the power issue. It must also rebuild Russell's confidence that the car will not betray him again. And that requires more than an apology. Russell needs proof. The same power delivery every lap. The same energy deployment at every critical point. The same acceleration when he presses the throttle. No sudden weakness. No unexpected loss. No moment where he becomes vulnerable before the team can warn him. That consistency is what creates trust. Without it, every long straight becomes another question. Will the power arrive? Will the battery support the acceleration? Will the car protect me? Those thoughts may last only a fraction of a second. At Formula One speed, a fraction can decide everything. Mercedes also had to understand whether the problem affected only Russell's car, or whether it was part of something broader. Wolff said the issue affected Mercedes' engines. That wording is important. It suggests the weakness may not have been isolated to one machine. Other Mercedes-powered cars may have experienced similar loss. The consequences may simply have been less visible. One driver may have suffered the problem in clean air. Another may have lost less at the critical moment. Russell experienced the worst possible combination. Reduced power. Opening lap. Compressed field. Long straight. Cars attacking. No room to recover. That turned a technical weakness into a crash. Antonelli could still continue and score heavily. That does not make the problem harmless. It only means the failure did not punish every car equally. A team can win and still carry a serious defect. The victory can hide the warning. Russell's retirement exposed it. And that contrast created an uncomfortable reality inside Mercedes. One side of the garage celebrated. The other side investigated a failure. One driver strengthened his championship lead. The other driver watched his title hopes suffer through a problem he could not control. That is how internal tension grows. Not through one accusation. Through repeated differences in outcome. There is no evidence Mercedes deliberately gave Russell weaker equipment. There is no proof of intentional favoritism. But perception does not always wait for proof. Russell sees Antonelli continuing. He sees his own points disappearing. He hears that both cars receive equal support. Then reliability produces unequal consequences. That can become emotionally difficult. Especially when the standings record only the result. The championship table does not explain that Russell lost power. It does not explain the danger at Eau Rouge. It does not explain the battery failure in Canada. It does not explain the failed pit stop in Monaco. It simply shows Antonelli ahead by 50 points. That is why Mercedes had to protect Russell publicly. But it also had to act privately. The engineers needed to find the exact cause. Was the battery state of charge too low? Did the harvesting system fail? Did the engine enter a protective mode? Was the deployment map incorrect? Did software reduce the output? Was there a hardware problem affecting the energy release? Each possibility creates a different solution. And each solution carries a trade-off. Protect the battery too aggressively, and performance may fall. Deploy more energy, and the system may empty too early. Change the engine mode, and straight-line speed may suffer. Alter the harvesting strategy, and braking behavior may change. Mercedes could not simply add more power. It needed predictable power. That is the real requirement. A slightly weaker system that works every time is safer than a stronger one that can suddenly disappear. Russell does not need the maximum number on one lap. He needs the same response on every lap. That is how championships are built. Not through peak performance alone. Through repeatable performance. And Belgium proved that Mercedes had not achieved that standard on Russell's car. The race ended before it had properly started.